F1 title fight paranoia has been rampant this season, and it's just thrown up the most surprising theory yet. Red Bull, McLaren and occasionally Ferrari have engaged in arguments about all sorts of technical tricks that F1 teams might be employing to gain an edge. These have varied from dark arts and grey areas to accusations that amount to outright cheating. Against the backdrop of Red Bull suffering a wind drought of more than 3 months, being caught and overhauled in the Constructors' Championship, and Max Verstappen coming under more pressure for the driver's title, tensions seemed to peak at the Brazilian Grand Prix. It was a high-stress event in which Verstappen took aim at critics and officials, and the wider arguing took a fresh twist with the emergence of Red Bull's claims of alleged tyre trickery. Verstappen brought his team back from the brink with a brilliant victory, which should ease the worst of the pressure, and Red Bull privately thinks it may have won another battle too. The technical tit-for-tat between the top teams has included Red Bull putting pressure on rivals in the FIA on topics like flexi-wings, and Red Bull itself has come under suspicion for running a bib adjuster device that rivals believe could have been used to make surreptitious changes under Parc Fermé conditions. Now, Red Bull has become suspicious that multiple teams, including McLaren and Ferrari, have been adding water into the tyres to keep them cooler during races. After supposedly witnessing something unusual in Singapore related to water and a rival's wheel rim, and believing it has seen signs of watermarks on wheel rims since, Red Bull suspects a small amount of fluid is being used to help transfer heat from the tyre to the rims. Doing this through the valve would supposedly be quite easy, as it might be as little as 50 grams worth of liquid being used. Doing it undetected seems a lot harder, because it would be a clear breach of the technical regulations and go against a technical directive that expressly forbids any change of the moisture content of the tyres. Pirelli supplies the tyres with dry air inside, so how this could be interfered with without detection has not been explained. But we understand Red Bull itself explored this tactic in the past before it was clamped down on, and it reckons engineers who have since moved to other teams have continued with the practice. Whatever Red Bull has witnessed led to the matter being raised with the FIA, which along with tyre supplier Pirelli has been on the lookout for any suspicious behaviour in the last couple of events, including during the post-sprint race tyre checks in Brazil. No evidence has been found of any wrongdoing so far, and there's not a great deal of suspicion of any outside of Red Bull. That's what makes this so unusual. Past concerns, whether about teams taking flexible bodywork too far or the Red Bull ride height adjustment claim, haven't been isolated to one team being convinced it's happening. They usually have others who privately, if not publicly, agree with them. That didn't happen with this specific theory in Brazil. It was mostly met with surprise and a little bemusement over how it would work, what the benefits would be, and how easy it would be to control the pressure changes inside the tyre as a result. Amusingly, someone senior at one of the 4 teams supposedly engaging in this trickery even told us privately that they were flattered Red Bull thought they were capable of that kind of advanced manipulation. We're not saying that Red Bull's seeing ghosts. If it has eyewitness testimony from its own mechanics or engineers of something unusual when the tyres are being fitted or removed from the rims post-race, then it's understandable why they would be trying to force the issue. Plus, if it's only eyewitness accounts, then it may well be something that you only believe if you're one of the people who has seen whatever it is they've seen. But Red Bull feels the performance of certain teams in the Brazil sprint race specifically vindicated its suspicions. Its relative race pace was stronger than it has been for a while, but the wet Grand Prix then got in the way of supporting that initial conclusion. In terms of establishing any evidence of a shift as a result of the FIA taking a closer look at this alleged trick, we and Red Bull only have a really small sample set to judge it on, and it was a compromised one too. Tyre wear was higher than expected during the sprint due to the resurfaced track and higher than expected temperatures, so most cars were at what Pirelli categorises as 100% wear by the end of that race anyway. But it will be interesting to see over the final 3 races, especially the hot ones in Qatar and Abu Dhabi, whether there is any noticeable shift in race pace performance trends after all. Red Bull isn't demanding the FIA confirm teams have been doing it or even take retrospective action against them. That would be very hard to do given there isn't any tangible evidence of it happening, and Red Bull privately admits there isn't proof teams have continued doing it. All they've seen are signs of something that has set some alarm bells ringing. What Red Bull wants, if it's in fact happening, is for it to stop. Making representations to the FIA, combined with the fact this has now emerged publicly, means suspicions of any ongoing use of such trickery will likely be quelled, as it's now being closely monitored. This might just have laid a little ghost to rest within Red Bull, because even if this turns out to be nothing, Red Bull's been searching for answers, and one less conspiracy theory to waste energy on has to be a good thing. That also explains why Red Bull would believe something like this is happening, beyond the fact Every team tends to suspect other teams are doing things wrong when they start doing well. Red Bull has been very concerned by how suddenly its early season dominance evaporated, starting with the Miami Grand Prix in early May. Verstappen won 4 of the first 5 races, but then only 3 of the next 15 until Brazil. He probably would have been victorious in Miami as well if a safety car hadn't been perfectly timed for Lando Norris to win instead, but was already under a bit more pressure than normal. And since the race after Miami, at Imola, Red Bull has generally found itself weaker than McLaren, which it feels has been particularly strong late in race stints. After the summer break, Ferrari has become increasingly competitive too. Red Bull has been looking in the mirror during this period. It's explored various aspects of its own car development, admitting it's had some correlation issues and even using pre-Miami floor designs at some points to gain a reference. There have been some corrections to its front wing and floor designs in response to this, which has helped improve its own performance level in recent races. But Red Bull believes that nothing has changed enough on its own side through the season to explain the dramatic drop-off it suffered, particularly in race pace, hence looking at how its rivals have achieved their steps forward. McLaren's been fairly prolific with its development. This includes a trio of upgrades across the US, Mexico, Brazil triple header, culminating in a whole new medium downforce rear wing that might only be used once more this season, if at all. That's how flat out and well understood McLaren's upgrade strategy is. Ferrari's also managed to get on top of some underlying car issues, especially since the summer break, having bought a new floor to help with porpoising problems and delved a little bit more into the flexible front wing trickery it was initially unhappy McLaren and Mercedes were exploiting. So if rivals have added performance and better car behaviour, while Red Bull has started to hit against the ceiling, this could easily add up to the in-season swing we've witnessed, even if the scale of it is unusual. But Red Bull does not believe Ferrari's and McLaren's progress can be justified by car upgrades alone, which implies something else. It's not just that Red Bull feels targeted over certain things like the bib adjuster, it believes other teams have been able to get away with certain tricks for longer than they should, in the interests of creating a title fight. The RB20 looked a little sharper again in Brazil, and Verstappen being absolutely on it certainly helped, which added up to a well-timed, huge relief for both team and driver. Verstappen had gone into the event facing a barrage of questions and quite intense criticism of his racing style after a contentious race in Mexico with Norris. Off the back of that, he accused F1 of having a nationality bias when he said, "I've got the wrong passport for this paddock," and Verstappen's feelings of persecution only escalated through the weekend. First, he was annoyed Charles Leclerc didn't get the same community service penalty for swearing in Mexico as Verstappen had controversially been given a few races ago in Singapore. Then there was frustration in the Brazil sprint race over the handling of a late stoppage for Nico Hülkenberg's Haas, which triggered a virtual safety car that coincided perfectly with Oscar Piastri handing teammate Norris the lead and prevented Verstappen attacking Piastri himself. Verstappen got a penalty for running too close to Piastri's McLaren under that VSC, which dropped him to 4th. He then got knocked out in Q2 in Sunday morning's postponed qualifying session, after which Verstappen was furious at how a late crash for Lance Stroll was handled and the time it took for the session to be red flagged. Once Verstappen had won the Grand Prix, both he and Red Bull changed their tune from strongly feeling they had been screwed over by the combination of yellow and red flags in the aftermath of the Stroll crash to admitting they had just been super unlucky. That showed just how big an impact the results on track have on how people behave off track. As soon as they won again, the pressure deflated a little and the tone mellowed. Verstappen even delighted in taking a stab at the British media in the post-race press conference because there weren't any in the room. We thought that was genuinely funny and fair. Our guys rarely make it into the post-race press conference due to the strange scheduling post-race that means various important media commitments end up clashing. But Verstappen had been pelted with questions in that room only a few days before, so it was valid for him to notice some of those same people weren't around when he'd just put in one of his best ever drives. That reaction, just like the most jubilant celebrations from Verstappen and Red Bull that we can remember, showed just how important this victory was to them. Now Red Bull has wrestled control of one championship narrative back, maybe that will quell the paranoia that seemed to be about to reach a tipping point inside that team. Unless a rival team now pipes up to claim the sudden end of Red Bull's win drought has something fishy about it.